So today we're going to talk about how a person can buy more than one or two properties, or they get stuck on 500k of borrowing capacity and they can't buy any more properties. We're going to reveal how you can get past that and how you can keep buying more and more properties and getting past the barrier of whatever your maximum borrowing capacity is. Now, if you're listening and you're watching and you're here and you're trying to build a property portfolio and you've been stuck and you can't get the right advice and you can probably only buy one or two properties, or you've only got maybe a couple and that's it and you've been maxed out, this is the podcast for you today. We're going to discuss how to unravel your borrowing capacity, how you can buy more than 5 properties, not get stuck, and keep pushing the limit. Okay, today we have an experienced strategist broker named Sebastian at IFB Brokers, who's going to talk about today how we can actually get past the one or two properties and keep continuing your investing journey and not get stuck. Seb, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. New waters for me, but happy to be here.
First podcast?
First podcast, yes. First time on camera.
So we should be fine. But for the listeners and viewers, Seb is actually my personal broker as well. He works a lot with our clients also. But I thought for the people that may be watching, they might know you because a lot of our clients have worked with you. For the listeners and the viewers, they don't know who you are. Do you want to give a bit of a background story, who you are, where you started, how you got into mortgage broking, so we can just get a bit of understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my finance career a while ago now, probably 15 years ago. We started at the bank in financial planning, as you already know. This went for about 7 years. I think it was 8 years overall at the bank or in the banking and finance sector. About 6 of those were in financial planning, which is, a lot more strategy-based, long-term goals, not specific to lending, but obviously overall growing people's wealth and managing different aspects of their life. And then after about that 8-year mark, we decided to try our hand in mortgage broking. And in the month of March or Feb 2020, the month of COVID, we decided to open a business.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. But it's been the best thing that we've ever done, or I've ever done, and have not looked back since. Really enjoy the property aspect of it. I love working with you guys in the team because gives us a more well-rounded service for our clients, for your clients, for our clients. And I think it's really fits a gap in the market that people need.
Yeah. Awesome. And when you were at the NAB, was there anything that you seen with the bankers there that were probably some red flags or things that you seen when it came to lending that you're like, you scratch your head and go, oh, this can be done a better way or a different way?
It's really hard because at a bank, obviously they've got one product to offer or, a couple of products within their banking system. They're also pushed very hard on sales or targets and things like that. So they can only give you advice on what they know and what they're allowed to discuss. They can only give you the options that are available to them. I found it really hard for them and for others to get the best overall idea of what they can do when you're limited to X amount. It's trying to put together a diet, but having one restaurant to eat at, it makes it very limited, right?
Yeah.
So becoming a broker, it's a lot easier because we work with over 30 banks. Some clients might fit really well at the NAB. Some clients might fit well at CBA. There are other lenders that might be a better fit. It opens up things where rates aren't the most important discussion. It's very much about goals and where do you want to be. And I found that the banks, it's really difficult to have that goal-based discussion and be able to give the right product advice because you only have a certain amount of products that you can discuss. So it wasn't a knock on the bankers, but very much on the system that they're built in. It's a difficult place to be where you can only discuss one option.
Yeah, okay. And so you got into the world of mortgage broking, working for yourself. I see it every day, but was there anything that you seen in particular that most brokers were getting wrong from day one when it comes to building a property portfolio? That's what I kind of really want to touch on today because a lot of people listening, they're investors. That's what we deal with. I see it all the time. But in your experience, you're in it. I'm a buyer's agent, very different. But was there anything in particular that you see from brokers structuring other people's loans, or what you've seen from other brokers that you probably worked with in the past?
Yeah, this goes back to the financial planning. The brief career that was in there was in financial planning. But I find the problem with a lot of brokers in our industry, and our industry is a very small barrier of entry. So it's very easy for someone to become a broker. It's a Cert 4 or a diploma at most, then you can become a broker. they tend to look at things very transactionally. So Frank comes in, wants to buy a property, beautiful. Let's just go to this bank. It's very easy to work with. Let's just go to them. He works. The deeper discussion is really the crucial point between, and I think the differentiator between transactional brokers and more strategic brokers. And to be honest, I think transactional brokers are in a bit of trouble. You know, we discuss this a lot with AI and stuff. The main concern is they don't ask about the intended goals for lending going forward. So they might come in and say, yep, we want to buy a property. Amazing. Quickly run your calculator, get your serviceability, done, on your way. I think the problem is there's no deeper discussion on, okay, is this property purchase 1? Are we looking at 2? Are we looking at 3? What's the next 5 years look like for you? Are they, you know, late 20s, early 30s? Are there going to be kids on the horizon? Things like that can impact then the purchase of number 2 and 3. So if we structure it correctly now and anticipate these things that may happen, it helps eliminate some of the hurdles come the time where wife's on mat leave, doesn't want to return to work full time. They've already had that discussion. They may not have. But I think it's our obligation to at least prompt that discussion with them. Some people genuinely don't know because they haven't been asked. You know, sometimes they go to a barbecue on the weekend and someone says, hey, I think you should buy in, you know, God knows where because a friend of a friend made good money there. And that's it. That's all they need. They come to us, we want to buy a property. I think the best thing to do, and you have to be careful because we can't give advice, but we can at least ask the questions and say, hey, have you thought about this? If you haven't, it might be worthwhile sitting with a team such as Fresh Start and map out what your next 5 years look like, what your property journey what you want your property journey to be. And therefore we can reverse engineer and say, hey, I think we structure it this way. So yes, we get you what you need now, but it's really easy to look after you long term as well. The biggest issue I think in our industry is it's very competitive. So everyone just wants to get this first deal done, keep you happy, and don't really think about what the next few years, 5 years, 3 years will look like for you.
Yeah, exactly right. And then you make a transaction and it's just hard to unravel when you go down that road because if you buy it under your name, a different entity or whatever structure you go with, you just can't unravel that. There's stamp duty, there's taxes, there's everything involved, and then it's too late.
Yep.
And you've probably seen that a lot as well. But going back to that, you know, you got these transactional brokers going to always mainstream lenders or other lenders. There is a kickback incentive as well, a certain percentage, isn't there? That sometimes if you go to other lenders, do they get a higher commission rate and that's why they'll push you always into those kind of same lenders that they work with?
You know what? I actually can't tell you yes or no. I think that we all paid pretty similarly from most lenders. It's never a driver. I can't tell you the difference between CBA, First Mac. I don't know. It would be marginal. It should never be, it shouldn't be part of the discussion or the thought process. It should never be a consideration from a broker or really anyone in the industry. It should purely be on, does this lender meet the client's goal? You're probably right. There are probably brokers out there that focus on that. I can't tell you. I wouldn't know what the commission rate differences are from. I find the issue, like we said, the first one might work here. And you're right, there are costs when unraveling bad lending structures. There's also problems with, say, you buy a really strong property, has a 6 or 7% yield. That's really good if you have a mainstream lender and the rate's high fives at the moment, right? Then if the next purchase, we need to go to a second tier and the rate's a 7.5, it's not that the property's less attractive, it's the loan is not as favourable. And that's because we've structured it poorly. So we'd had to go to a third tier lender who will accommodate the purchase, but they'll charge you a higher rate.
So when you're saying structure it poorly, in what sense for the people so they can digest that a little bit easier for them to understand?
It's different borrowing structures. So people might not understand that you can actually buy property in a company, in a family trust. People that have an interest in their super fund and their long-term retirement, they can actually buy it in their self-managed super funds. If they have it set up or if they don't, but it's something of interest, they can go and speak to an accountant, seek some advice and set up a super fund. There's different structures and entities in which you can actually own property, and different structures have different benefits for your long-term goals.
Okay, so you said super fund, you said trusts, companies.
Yeah.
If you buy property under a trust, does that affect your personal borrowing capacity?
It can. In many instances, it absolutely can. And, we talk about this a lot. I think the number one thing borrowers need to think about when they start, looking at their investing journey is, number one, what their longer term goals are. They should sit down with, themselves, their partner, their parents, whoever's giving them advice, and say, all right, well, we're making a move now. What does 5 and 6, 7 years look like? And then what team do I need to structure myself around to get this done? I need a good BA, we need a good broker, and we need a great accountant. Those three at the minimum, plus maybe a good conveyancer, a good lawyer that will help with the contracts. But the top three for me are the most important. They will help give you the right advice if you have a strong team on how to structure things going forward and which entity will be best beneficial for each of your purchases. Now, I know that's a long-winded way to answer that, but it's really important. Those are the two most important things I think borrowers need to think about when they're either starting their journey or even just before it. Who's my team that's going to help me get there? Have they got experience with buying property? If they do, how many? And what my long-term goals are. With knowing that, then you can start diving into, okay, does this structure work for me? Family trusts are really strong because we've worked through some experience, through some examples of this. If you have a property that is performing really well and it's held in your family trust and it actually covers all of its costs, so it makes $100,000 a year, say in rent, your property portfolio, and it costs you $80,000. That's a split between your interest rates and your rental expenses like maintenance and that. You clearly have a $20,000 net benefit, right? That trust with some banks can be excluded from the next borrowing. So if you go and buy again, they can exclude that debt because it genuinely looks after itself and covers its cost.
That's a secret sauce right there.
It's a secret sauce, right? But it's also not secret. I think more people need to understand that these tools are available and that they should be getting advice from, competent brokers, competent accountants to take advantage of these structures that will help them get better and better and buy more and more property.
So with that trust set up, I know once again, you're not an accountant, so once again, this is not financial advice for the people that are listening. This is just general advice and we're just talking about, different policies and how things work. Family trust, is that the same? Do you use that as a corporate trustee or just a normal traditional family trust? Is there different ways of setting up that structure correctly? Because, if it's a corporate trustee, maybe you can exclude it there a little bit more easier, or it's virtually the same?
It's the same from a lending point of view. And again, I'm happy we put that disclaimer in, not financial advice. You need to go and seek that from professionals. I would speak to your accountant because the structure might be important for the state that you're operating in or that you're buying in. There are some benefits within certain states for different structures. There are also benefits if you're self-employed, if you're a company. We're going into Div 7As, but again, this is something that's important that you get advice from your accountant on. If you pull money out of the business into your personal name, you're then paying at your marginal tax rate, right? So if you buy it in the company to company transfers don't incur that. They're at the same tax rate.
Correct, yeah.
So it also might be that in that state, such as New South Wales, companies have exposure to the land tax threshold, whereas the family trust might not. So if you're looking to invest in New South Wales, you need to speak to your accountant and say, hey, which structure best suits me? Do I go into a company? Do I go into a family trust? Is there a difference in having a corporate trustee versus a personal? Does it protect my assets? This is where we go back to those first two questions. Your team and your goal is so important because without it, you're driving blind.
And I've got a client. He's got his business owner. He's got a company. His company is structured as a company. His business. He gets his money from the company and then he transfers that into another company and buys property through that company. Where for me, I've done a lot of corporate trustee purchases. So I receive my dividend from the company and then I will go and buy a property through the trustee, which is a little bit different. And the reason why I think they do that is because you don't pay that top-up tax. So the people listening and that are business owners, if you've got a company, once again, not financial advice, but they transfer money from their company to another company and buy a property on there. And Sebastian saying you don't pay any top-up tax, and that's how people will generate wealth through a company structure. And once again, that can exclude the debt as well if that company is profitable in that with the property in that trust
Absolutely.
or in that company, I should say.
Top up tax, just quickly. So top up tax, and again, high level, go and speak to your accountant, not financial advice, but your company generally has a tax rate between 25 and 30%, assuming that you've pulled 300K out, right? You're in the top bracket. You're in that 47% top bracket in your personal name. If you're making 300,000, you're in that 47% tax rate. Company sitting at 25 to 30. If you pull that money out of your company into your personal name, the gap between that 25 and 30 and the 47% is the top-up tax. That's what you're talking about?
Correct.
Yeah. So if they move it from their company to another company where they buy property, they don't pay that 20% odd gap in top-up tax. That can then be used to buy more property.
Correct, yep.
Now, again, your accountant will go through this with you. Companies have really strong policies like that where you won't save, you'll save on top-up tax, but you get no CGT exemptions, so capital gains exemptions. If you sell the property, you pay full capital gains. If you own it in a family trust in your personal name, you get the 50% capital gains exemption if you hold it for more than 12 months. It is why I harp on with all our clients is we need to establish at least a basic game plan and a strong team around you if you want to be a long-term property investor.
And it's you hit the money on the head there, because you were saying before as well, different land tax rules for different entities.
Yeah.
I know in New South Wales, if you set up a unit trust in a special way, that you will be exempt from land tax. Where if you put the property under your name or under just a normal trustee, if like a family trust or a company, you'll be hit with land tax when you get to that certain threshold.
Yep.
So the structure is very important, and for every state and territory, you got to look at it very differently. I know in Tassie, it's 300 grand of land value, 300 grand or 600 grand of land value, but it's the same in personal name, trust, and company.
Yep.
Where in Victoria, it's a lot different.
We're the lucky state.
Yeah, we're the lucky state.
Yep.
It starts to increase as soon as you go into a trust. A trust pays more land tax than a company, but that's more of an accounting thing that we can one day get a broker on. But going back to this, pros and cons with when you're setting up a trust. I know, once again, people listening to this, everyone's situation is very different. You get someone that comes in, okay? We'll just paint a picture. Yep. You've got 200 grand of savings or equity to use, your family, that's your house. You got maybe, 200 grand of household income. You want to get started, okay? Got a family home, you've got some equity, or maybe you've got no family home and you're rent investing. But they got goals to build a property portfolio of 5 or more property, and they want to try and get a 6-figure income.
Yep.
Going into a trust, I know you can't answer this, and this is, we just want to kind of paint a picture. Is it important to straight away go into a trust, or it's going to a personal name to get the first one under the belt?
Again, it always ties back to that long-term goal. So if they own their house unencumbered, right? In this hypothetical, they've got about 200 grand in savings, 200K family household income, kids, no kids, kids on the horizon, kids not on the horizon. The reason why this becomes important is because if their aspiration is to buy, hey, we've got family home paid off, we want to have a property portfolio of at least 5 properties that we then pay down over 5-10 years, and we're looking at retiring. We then know, okay, we need to structure this property, we need to structure their debt in a way that allows them to buy at least 5 properties over the next 7 years. And we should anticipate in, 3 years, 4 years, there may or may not be children, but if there is, we might lose some household income. How do we make sure that we structure their debt so that we don't slow down the ball towards their property portfolio goals? So in your instance, that would be the discussion we're having. You've put yourself in a great position. You've got no debt on your home. You've got great household income, 200K in savings. What's the plan? Where do we go from here? What are you looking to achieve? If they say, well, we want to buy at least 4 or 5, perfect. Let's structure this properly now. We will look at, what state you're looking at buying in, who's your accountant, or if we'll work with the internal team as accountant. In this state, do we go company, do we go trust? I'll be led by that accountant, but I'll give them the advice of, hey, based on some lending and what their long-term goals are, we need to pick a structure like this, either a trust, unit trust, company. Because if we cap out at property 2 by buying in their personal name, then we have an issue. We've done the right thing with quickly getting them the loan, but we haven't done the right thing with helping them move towards their property goals. So it always ties back to that initial discussion.
So you're saying that once you max out your personal borrowing capacity, you just can't go into a trust. It doesn't work like that. You have to do this before. So it's a bit of forward thinking and saying, okay, before we max out, we have to maybe think about trust earlier on.
Absolutely. So if you get into this and you say, all right, we'll buy 2 properties, we've maxed out our debt, partner goes on mat leave or pat leave, whatever it may be. Now our income's dropped, our debt levels have stayed the same, and the banks assess this. And I know this is a bit high level and a bit technical, but so back to that instance where we talk about you've got 100,000, of income in your property portfolio, you got $80,000 of expenses. Within the trust structure, you can turn around and genuinely say, well, it's covering its own debt, we'll exclude it. So for the situation where you're in with this family, they've got a property in trust or company, it covers its own expenses, we can exclude that from this next assessment. The bank will look at them, again, back to square one. Family home, no debts essentially, 200K of income, whatever the deposit may be. We know they can borrow that amount because we've just got them the loan for it. So we can reopen another company, buy it in that, make sure that it's looking after its own debts, rinse and repeat. As long as the properties are covering their debts.
Okay.
Or their expenses.
So that there, I guess, is the part there where for people listening is that's the important part. If you buy the property and it's not covering its debts from day one under the trust, you have to wait for that property to become cash flow neutral positive, correct?
Yep.
Until you can exclude that debt.
Yep.
So what you may, or for me, what I see is you get a lot of people that are first-time investors, and I know sometimes we'll paint the picture and you'll create that plan for them to help them, get ahead. But sometimes you do need to sit on the fence for a while until that property becomes cash flow positive, until you exclude that debt. But you do see a lot of people when you start talking about trust or company and they see the costs, they kind of don't want to lean towards that way. They want to lean towards going back into their personal name. Can you touch on that, like what the mindset you need to have to, if you want to grow that portfolio, what you need to have so you can keep going and not get stuck?
Again, it's a trade-off, right? Because everything's got a trade-off. You can't have it all. There are some expenses. I think they're very limited. Trust setups and establishments are around between $2,000 and $2,500, give or take, depending on your accountant. The trade-off for that $2,500 might be that I can buy an extra property. And this is why we talk to a lot of clients and say it's not just about buying a property, it's buying the right one. You need to speak to people that buy hundreds, if not thousands, and do the 1,000 hours of research to get the right properties. Because if they're the right properties, it's very easy to continue buying them. If it costs you nothing to own, you can just rinse and repeat. So for us, it's very much around, do you take a short-term hit of $2,500 to set it up so that you have the ability to keep buying more and more? Do you believe that the property you've purchased will grow more than $2,500 to $5,000 in that year? Nearly all of yours do. So again, when we're discussing this and they say, oh, well, there's an initial upfront cost. Yes, but after 12 months, you'll probably, make it 10 times that in capital growth, depending on what the guys have purchased.
And I guess you need to make sure you get it right from the first time. And I think for the people that are listening that are first-time investors or haven't started investing yet and they're about to get involved, this can be a crucial part because the mindset is the most important thing. People look at the cost, go, oh my God, I got to pay $2.5 grand for a trust structure set up. That's too expensive. I'll just do my personal name. There's less accounting fees. There's less expenses. But then the long-term goal of you being able to buy an extra 1 or 2 or 3 properties starts to reduce as soon as you start to reduce your own personal borrowing capacity. And I'm speaking from, me going through that experience. Like one of my properties that I've got in Ipswich, bought the property for 300 grand. Today it's worth 750 plus. It's my personal name, which is great. I've used a lot of equity. It's helped me buy a lot more properties with it. But if I keep taking out debt from that property to buy more property, my personal debt keeps going up and up and up. And then when I want to buy a family home, because that is the goal one day, got too much debt on my personal name. I've got all the other properties under a trust. Regardless of that, I've still got all this debt, which is about 600-700 grand. Maybe I think I've got more now, nearly $1 million of debt in my personal name. So I'm sitting there now after saying, how do I get that out? The only way of getting that out is I either, 1, sell the property, or 2, transfer it into a trust. Putting onto a trust, we worked it out. I've got to pay capital gains tax for the sale price. I've got to pay stamp duty again. I've got to, it's just all these accounting fees. it's too late. So the people that are about to start their journey, this is important because I've had that property for 5 years. It's grown 140, 150% in 5 years. I can't just move that now out. And if I want to buy the home, I've already got $1 million of borrowing on my head.
Yep.
I've got a couple other I've got 2 properties in my name. I'm going to have to sell them if it's going to affect me from buying that family home that I want.
When you started that, when you first bought that property though, Frank, what was your mindset? Did you want to buy more properties, or was this,
Of course.
was this one of 2 or 3? Because there's nothing wrong with it. And this is what we discuss with clients. If you want to buy 1 or 2, try and make a couple $100,000 in 5 years and hope that the growth is really strong. That's your goal. That's your strategy. What was yours when you bought
My
this?
goal was big. I always wanted a 6-figure income from the portfolio.
Yep.
I was very fortunate enough when I started my journey. I saved up $200,000 because I dropped out of school 15 years old and I worked all the way up until I was 26 or 27 when I bought those properties. When you're 15 years old and you're working full time, you're not spending any money. So I was saving all my money. I went and bought 3 properties off the bat.
Yep.
And a couple of them were really bad investments out of the 3, and they really affected me. But I remember going to an accountant here in Melbourne, a big firm, and he looked at me, and I was just this young kid. I bought the property, and he looked at me and goes, "Oh, no, you don't need to go into trust." Didn't ask me about my goals. Didn't ask me what I want to achieve.
Yep.
Didn't ask me anything. And I was learning about this, and I was like, "You sure?" And he goes, "Yeah, no." He goes, "Maybe after the 3rd or 4th."
Yep.
And I was like, "All right." And I just kept doing what I'm doing. Bought those 3, made massive mistake with the investments. They went, a couple of them went backwards in value. From there, got the right advice, got the right team around me, then started buying everything under a trust or corporate trustee. And there's, of course, different entities as well we've got also. But that there was the catalyst of me being able to buy and buy more and more property and not get stuck.
Yeah.
So the team and the vision at the very beginning, if it was aligned with what I wanted and had the right team there, probably wouldn't be in this position where I got, an issue with too much debt under my name.
And the question was intentional. It's not, just to put you on the spot, but it answers itself. And I keep going back and I sound like a bit of a broken record. It's really important, that initial upfront conversation around what the goal is, right? Because it might not be right to set you up with a trust or a company. If you want to buy 2 properties and then kind of cap out, you're timid about purchasing, you might buy 2 and sit on it for 5 years and say, well, then after 5 years, we'll see how we go. At that point, you say, well, let's buy it in your personal name. There's no substantial benefit with buying it in the trust for the next 5 years. At that 5-year period, we might need to sell one, restructure your next purchases. That's fine. It's really important to understand that, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's really important. Like you said with the accountant, he probably had really valid reasons for giving you that advice at that time, not considering what your future endeavors would be.
Of course. And, back then I was a mechanic, I was working full time.
Yeah.
Income was a lot different.
Dressed a little bit different
Of course, dressed a lot different, overalls back then. But I think people, if you walk into there and you may be looking like a dreamer, and at that time I probably looked like a dreamer, but that's what I wanted to try and achieve.
Yeah.
And they probably didn't take me seriously, or they didn't believe in the property that I purchased at the time when I had all the properties. I didn't believe they were great investments, which some of them weren't. But unfortunately, you go down that route, you make the wrong turn, and you pay the consequences.
Yeah, wrong turn at the time, right turn afterwards. It led you to the path you're on. I think the biggest thing, and we talked about this a lot, and this is not my wisdom at all, it's stolen from much smarter people than me, but people overestimate what they can do in a year and really severely underestimate what they can achieve in 10. When you stretch that horizon out and put a really solid plan in place, you'll be shocked at what you can achieve in 10 years. And I think it's, credit to you guys and the team that supports a lot of your clients, that discussion happens and needs to happen so that people have the comfort that long-term they'll be looked after, and it goes back to the costs of setting up a company versus trust. There's a trade-off with everything. People want to lose weight. Well, you've got to put in the effort of not eating the right calories and go to the gym. If you want to make more money, you've got to put in the extra hours. There's always a trade-off. If you want to have a property portfolio that will eventually set you up for retirement, there might be some initial upfront costs that you need to just incur.
Correct, yeah. And I think the team and getting that advice and them taking it on board is the most important thing, like you said. So
Absolutely.
And I would 100% agree with you. When I came to you, do you remember what the other broker said to me, what I could do?
No, I'm going to be honest, I can't remember. We've done a fair bit, mate.
This is where I like to... There's brokers and then there's brokers.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like there's accountants and there's accountants, and the other accountants, they're great accountants and they're good at what they do, or whatever it may be. It can be with dentists, it can be with mechanics, it can be with trades, whatever it may be. No offense to my ass accountant, but I got to a point where got my financials in order. I said, okay, what can I do? They go to me, Frank, we can refinance your 2 properties that are low doc. I had 2 properties that were low doc. So what that means is that they're low documentation, interest rates are like 8%. I was paying like 8% interest rates on 2 of these properties. Because I can refinance them full doc, take out 130 grand of equity, and that's it. You can't buy another property. That's all we can do. You're kind of maxed out. We have to wait to the new financial year and get your financials. So I'm like, all right, sweet. I go to you. I say, Seb, here's my financials. I want to buy as many properties as I can. Have a look at it. You have a look at my same financials. You look at it and you go, okay, we're going to take those 2 properties that are low doc. We're going to take them to full doc, get them down from 8% to 6.04. We're going to take out $300,000 of equity from your portfolio. You can use that to buy as many properties as you can under a different under a different structure, which was a corporate trustee that I went with. And I said, okay, awesome. Completely 2 different advices, same scenario, but the same 2 different brokers. So this is where, for me, I was like, fuck, there was a different world. I'm like, all right, I've got this equity, let's go.
Yeah.
Ready to rock and roll. Recently I just went and bought this duplex. It's cash flow positive. I've put it under a trust. Okay, we can exclude that debt, which is fantastic.
Yep.
And we can go again. I still got money left over because I only put down a 20% on that property.
Yep.
So that there is, if people listening to this, that's quite important when you get 2 pieces of different advice. I do it with clients. I go, a client has maxed out with their current broker, and then I take them to you. Like one of our clients, ACO, couldn't do anything. Bang. Seb, have a chat. Bang. You get her another property, away we go.
Yep. And it's really important. I want to knock any other brokers. It's again though, maybe I have a very fortunate background with understanding how to read financials and things like that. I'm also a little bit pedantic around reading, credit policies and things like this as well. Understanding credit policies and which policies suit certain clients is really important. Little instances where we've had clients that, again, have been told by brokers they can't do anything, they're self-employed. Their last 2 years' financials haven't been, the average of 2 years hasn't been as strong. But the most recent year, they've had an explosive year. They've been paying themselves regularly a wage that is higher than what their last 2 financials look like. There are banks that will take you as a director of a company and use your pay slips for servicing. Again,
so you don't have to wait the whole next financial year?
No, as long as you have been genuinely paying yourself a wage, there are banks that will take you as pretty much as an employee of your business. Again, not all brokers work this way. Not all brokers might understand that because, again, it's very easy to be transactional and not deep dive into these different policies. It works different. Different clients have different needs. They have different situations. And I think the difference between, your transactional and strategic brokers is you really need to be able to understand their overall goal, their overall situation, and then find the best fit. Or maybe they've gone direct to bank. Their bank might not offer that policy. So therefore their banks turned around and no fault of their own said, this is all we can give you. I'm biased, obviously. I don't think anyone should do it directly to banks outside of specific circumstances. Go to a broker. They have myself or any other broker. Just go to a broker because they deal with 30 odd banks.
30 different options.
30 different options. They should understand where your best fit is.
Yeah, very, very true. And so you go to a broker, you get your finance, you go buy on the trust company, whatever it may be. Let's say eventually there is going to be a time where you hit a wall.
Yep.
You said at the beginning of this conversation, SMSF.
Yep.
Buying under a self-managed super fund, does that affect your personal borrowing capacity or if you've got properties under a different entity as well?
Not at all. So your self-managed super fund, your super fund is essentially like a separate entity to you. Accountants might argue, but in very general high-level terms, your super is a separate thing to you. It is designed to help you look after your retirement. So yes, whatever you buy in there is theoretically yours, but it's also not. It's your super funds. You can't access it. You can't use it until you hit retirement age. Therefore, within your personal borrowing, it's not factored in because it's a separate entity from Frank.
So you hit a limit, that's another option where you can turn your normal superannuation fund, transfer it, self-managed super fund,
Correct.
buy property, does not affect your personal borrowing capacity at all.
No,
And
there
you
are
keep
different
going.
rules. Yeah, there are different rules in borrowing in your self-managed super fund. It needs to stand alone based on contributions, income earned inside that super fund. 90% of the time, there are some lenders that will let you guarantor it, but that's a bit more complicated. But ultimately, it needs to stand alone. It gives you another option if you're really interested in property and you really want to continue growing your property portfolio. That's a fantastic way to get into it earlier if you've capped out.
And what are the rules and regulations with that when it comes to lending, equity release, deposit amounts, interest rates?
High level rates are a little bit higher than your traditional outside of super lending. The super fund has to stand alone. So based on its contributions made, either via self-employed or you're employed, whatever your nominal contributions are or the minimum, that is essentially the super fund's income, as well as any cash that's in there that's invested, as well as any property rental income. So it literally needs to be like its own entity. How is the money coming in? That's how we can measure its serviceability.
Okay, so if you're contributing, say, 15 grand a year,
Yep.
that is your income.
That's what the super earns.
Okay.
If the rental income is 20 grand plus your 15 and you've got maybe 100,000 invested, it earns 5%. Overall, you've got about $40,000 of income.
Okay, so the borrowing capacity can be reduced a lot more than personal name, but you can
Correct.
still borrow and get into the
100%.
market.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's designed to, I believe it was designed, and again, people can pull that apart, but it's designed to protect people because its whole intention, your whole intention of your super is to protect your retirement. So it needs to be a lot more conservative than outside because they don't want you to take any stupid risks.
Yeah, of course. And 20% minimum 20% deposit on a residential property.
Standard, blanket approach, minimum 20%.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So there's ways that, if you max out your personal, you can go down a self-managed super fund, keep going. And a lot of people don't think about investing in super under property. There is an option there, but please get that advice from your accountant. One thing I wanted to touch on is crossing a property, collateralisation. We hear it a lot. When I used to go to seminars, they would talk about, don't do it, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And of course, when I started getting into this, I used to hear it from other brokers and I used to question it. But then as time goes on, there's times where people are in certain situations where this can be quite favourable and easy for the client to get into another property, maybe sometimes the only way. Do you want to touch on some of this and what it actually means for some people as well, listening about what is cross-collateralisation, and then we'll kind of jump into it.
Okay, cross-collateralisation, you say you owe, the example you gave before, couple owns their home, no debt on their home. They have, instead of having a $200,000 deposit, they've got nothing. No deposit, all the money's been used to pay down their debt. If they want to go and buy another property, they'll either need to increase their mortgage back up on their home, so take out, say, $200,000 against their home to then use as a deposit to fund the next purchase, or they can go to the bank and say, hey, we're buying this property for $500,000. There's no deposit, so we're going to borrow 100%. We're going to borrow $500,000 against it. The bank will turn around and say, there's too much risk. If something goes wrong, there's not enough buffer for us. So what we'll do is we'll take your home plus the $500,000 property you're buying, and we'll hold them both against that loan. That's all cross-collateralisation is. Two assets for the purpose of one loan. So that there's enough equity in those properties to make sure that the bank's got enough buffer to feel comfortable to take out that money, to give you the money. Is it bad? Again, it goes back to your situation. I'm sure if you asked 100 brokers, 100 accountants, you might get 50 of them saying that trust lending is bad.
Correct.
Company lending is bad. It's bad if it doesn't fit your goal or your situation. Cross-collateralising is like any tool. It's only bad or good depending on how you use it. So if your circumstance warrants it, like this couple, for example, I don't think there's a problem in doing it.
And it doesn't, when you're crossing a property, or doing anything, of course, there's a positive and negative, and you're going to get multiple different answers, regardless of what it does. But if there is a situation, a client, there is times, I know you've spoken about this as well, client can't do anything, can't release equity, but the easiest way to buy another property is just crossing the property, and it allows them to get into that property.
Well, I'll give you an example. So say you've got your home and own this couple. We'll keep going to this hypothetical couple. They've got no deposit. They've bought a property. They've crossed it with their home. They paid $500,000 for it. You've picked an absolute pearler. 12 months later, the property is now worth, say, $650,000, $670,000. There's enough equity in that. The debt is still sitting at $500,000. Of course, we haven't factored in stamp duty and all this. I don't want people to get ahead of themselves, but just for the sake of this, $500,000 purchase, $500,000 debt. In 12 months, it's gone up to $650,000, $670,000. The bank has now looked at this and said there's enough equity, there's enough growth in this property for us to not need the home. The home now can be released from this overall situation because this property is now worth $670,000. There's only a $500,000 debt. There's enough of a buffer for us. Let's release the home. In that circumstance, they can go and the property is self-sufficient. It's covering its expenses. It's held in that trust. 12 months later, without the clients pulling out any money, coming up with anything of their own, they can now go and set up another trust, or if there's enough income in that original trust, go and buy another property and just cross that with their home. So they haven't pulled out anything in their personal name. All the debt still stays within a system or within a structure that allows them to grow long term. And all they've had to do is wait for the property value to go up.
So when I listen to that, crossing a property, of course, there's good and bad with this. And like you said, you speak to multiple people, they're going to tell you the risks and everything like that. But it sounds like then, of course, the purchase is crucial. Because if you get the purchase wrong and you cross the property and you buy an apartment, it doesn't grow.
100%.
You buy an apartment, goes backwards in value, then you're stuffed.
Absolutely. But that underpins almost everything.
Yeah, of course.
You're not going to buy multiple properties if you keep buying lemons. Your whole value system and your belief system in property purchasing and investing is going to be crumbled.
Yeah.
And it does sound like we are, talking only optimistic. There are things and times where things go bad. This is why I tell people all the time, your team is so important. You need to have a good buyer's agency like you boys that buy properties irrespective of what the backyard barbecue talks are. You do the 1,000 hours of research. You find the properties that give you a far higher chance of growing strong because it underpins everything. If they grow, your rental income grows, your ability to pay down that debt is higher. We also have the basic sense is if it costs you nothing, you can keep buying property. If it costs you more and more money out of pocket, regardless of how the bank treats it, if it's actually costing you money, at a certain point you're tapped out. Whereas if it costs you nothing, in actual fact, it puts a bit of money into your pocket, the sky's the limit.
Because if the property is putting money in your pocket, then your income's going up. That's how the banks register it, correct?
Yeah, and I'm not talking about just from a banking point of view, just from your own family. Ultimately, you don't want to put yourself in any position where you're, eating baked beans and toast for 7 days a week. You don't want to live a miserable life.
100%.
So if you're buying the right properties and it doesn't impact the way your life is going, your lifestyle, it's very easy to just accumulate.
100%. Well, this has been valuable. I think I want to do a podcast on finance when it comes to different entities, self-management funds, trusts, companies, cross-collateralisation. I think it'll be good to bring you back and we can talk more about basic level sort of stuff I got, for the listener. But I wanted to do this one because I think people don't structure their loans correctly at the beginning of their journey.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are listening to this are probably new investors. And I think it's quite important. So I wanted to get this one out first and then we can bring you back and maybe talk about more LVR structures and how important that is and structuring the loan correctly. For example, I've got a client right now, my property strategist, he's like, Frank, client's got 300 grand of income. They're telling them to go 20%, just buy one property and then buy another property again. But they might be able to just buy two properties with that 300 grand and that's it. We might be able to structure and pull out the four. And so that gets a bit more technical, but I think something like that will be good to bring you on and we can, pick your brain a little bit more on that.
Might need a whiteboard for that one, Frank.
Yeah, we might need the whiteboard. But I want to just lastly ask you 3 questions, okay? I want to go to like a bonus pool here of 3 questions that I think will help the listener and the viewer.
Sure.
Okay. First one's, what's one thing you wish every property investor will consider before applying for a loan?
I'm going to sound like a broken record again. You must consider what your goals are. I mean, it really does underpin everything. If you don't have an idea of why you're trying to purchase property and how long, how many you want to go for. It just, you're going to fall into the trap of transactional broking. I want to buy property. Cool. Any other aspirations? Nah. Let's just get you the best deal right now. Not consider any structure, not consider any long-term setups, anything like that. Okay. You really need to nut down at least a vague idea of what you want to achieve with your property purchasing.
Yep. Awesome. Second one is, can you give us an example? Don't have to say the client's name, but of the existing client that you've worked with, present, past, that has structured their loan not correctly from the beginning.
Yep.
And what the consequences were. So people can understand what has stopped this individual in particular from expanding their property portfolio and buying an extra maybe 1 or 2 or 3 properties.
Yeah, okay. So we've got a couple. This is not going to be hard. We've got a couple. Let's call him Frank for the purpose of this discussion. Frank is a very high net worth, or not high net worth, but high income earner. He earns 200,000 plus. He has a wife. She stays at home, looks after their 2 children. They are rent-fest. They've done this successfully. They're a great example for people that want to live in certain areas but understand it is not viable to buy there. They have 4 properties at the moment that they've bought, or they've got 3 and they're looking to buy the 4th. They're capped out because she's not working. Their rent in the area that they want to live in is actually quite high, which impacts their borrowing capacity. So they've bought 3 properties, potentially the 4th, and now they're done. He has aspirations of buying many more because all the properties are performing really well. I think you guys bought 3 of those ones. They're all positively geared, not even neutral. They literally add money into his pocket. But from a banking point of view, and people might ask, well, it doesn't make sense if a property earns 100,000 or the portfolio earns 100,000 and the costs are 80. Why does that impact from your borrowing? What happens with lenders? They have to be ultra conservative when they assess. So if your property portfolio earns you 100,000, they do something called rental shading. They drop the income by 20%. Some do 90, some don't, but as a general rule, it's about a 20% drop. So your $100,000 portfolio is now only earning you 80 from a banking point of view. Your expenses, which are 80,000, that's based on your interest rate, and say 6% interest rate, 60 grand of expenses, 20 grand of general other expenses, maintenance, whatever. Now you're on par. But what they actually do when they assess it is they add a 3% buffer to your interest rate. So your rental expenses are no longer 60,000, they're now 90,000 at 9%, not 6%. Plus the 20,000 in expenses for your maintenance. So your property portfolio, which is started with 100,000 and 80,000 actual net difference, so 20 grand positive, has now gone to 80 plus 110 of expenses. So your portfolio is losing 30 grand in the eyes of the bank. Does that make sense? I know those high level numbers. So for this client in particular, all 4 of his properties, from a banking perspective, assuming they all hit the same numbers, instead of being positively geared and putting money in his pocket, might actually be losing him 20 grand a year, 30 grand a year from a serviceability assessment point of view. So his $200,000 plus whatever rent he actually receives really looks like him losing $70,000, $80,000 from an assessment, and we've only got 120 to play with. Again, I know this is a lot of numbers and people might think, but this is how it looks like when you're assessing it from a bank point of view. If they had have structured this differently from the start, say 2-3 properties were held in one trust, they genuinely look after their own expense, they go to the side, we open a new company, new trust, he can keep repeating this process while his properties look after themselves and essentially cap out when his equity runs out.
So with that client there in particular, let's say if his current property portfolio, if he put the investments under the trust, I think it's 4 properties you said?
It's about 4, yeah. I think it's about 4 at the moment.
How many more could he get versus how many he can get right now?
He's done now. He can't buy anymore unless he makes some changes and sells, we restructure the debt and that becomes a different conversation. If everything stayed the same, he's done. He's capped out. Because again, although his properties perform really well, when you apply bank buffers, shading the rent,
3%.
his property's losing money from a bank's point of view. Whereas if they were in the trust and we say, hey, they look after themselves, accountant's happy to support this, or we can provide evidence that they to actually cover their costs. Exclude that from the next assessment. What's in his personal name? Nothing. He's only got rent expense plus a $200,000 income.
So do you know how many properties if he did, let's just say hypothetically, he had them under a trust, self-sufficient, how many properties could he get today if that was the case?
If we rinse and repeat, it's only limited to two things. One, how much equity he has or how much of a deposit he has to keep purchasing. And two, whether the new purchasers, how long it takes them to become self-sufficient. If they become self-sufficient within a year or two, we can then open a new company, new trust, depending on the accountant's advice, and rinse and repeat this process.
And do you know how many properties he could, with his current equity position, how he could, like it's saying hypothetically, I know this is all hypothetical.
Oh, hypothetical? Off the top of my head, he's got 400,000, at least another 2 or 3.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So the structure's not right from day one.
Yep.
And now it's cost him 2 or 3 purchases.
Yep.
And he's thinking, not doing anything.
The frustrating part is this is someone who had the goal of rent vesting. He knew he wanted to accumulate lots of property. We've run into a roadblock now and we're having the discussion of, okay, well, are any of these properties capped out? Do we sell them? Do we then redo your purchases? You know, in that we have to discuss whether the property has earned as much as it should, or is there still some legs in there? Is it better to wait? Do we not wait? It gets into a far more, I call it a speculative discussion around should we, shouldn't we? Whereas if we set this up right, it's very easy. You sell it when you're ready. You can borrow as long as you keep saving.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one example there for the listeners, to all the viewers as well, to go back. If you got a little bit lost there, go back and listen to that, because that there is someone that bought 4 properties. It's been probably 5-6 years. He's owned, maybe a few of them with purchase, but he's owned that portfolio for a while now, maybe 5 years. Some of those properties he's got in the last 12 to 18 months as well, but now he's stopped and he can't do anymore. But if he had it done correctly from day one, probably another 3 or 4 purchases. So pretty crazy. And the last question I have for you, Mr. Sebastian, what's one thing property investors often overlook when it comes to finance and they come to looking at a strategy from, in your perspective when they come to you?
It's 3 things. I'll give you 3 and I'll try not to keep it. Number 1, if you are dealing directly with a bank, they can only give you the policy that they're operating within. They can't look further. The banker might not be as experienced. They can only give you what they're limited to. So I would highly encourage you to look at a broker, because they can look at multiple strategies from different banks that might suit you a lot better than where you're currently banking. Number 2, and I'll go back to it, sit and take the time to work out what your goals are. It is so important. It will underpin everything going forward. I can't stress that enough. And what was the 3rd thing? The 3rd thing is build the right team around you. New to property investing, the barbecue chat might be good, and once in a while you'll pick a winner. Go to the professionals that do this day in, day out. They have life is just a bunch of odds. You want to stack the odds in your favor, go to the people that have a higher than likely chance of success and surround yourself with that team.
Awesome. Well, I think you've said enough. I think you've talked a lot.
Let me get out of here.
You definitely have given a lot of value. And I think for the people that are listening, like I said, if you are looking for a strategic broker, IFB brokers or Integrity Finance brokers, visit Sebastian, have a chat with him, tell him that you listen to the podcast and you want to reach out to him. When it comes to structuring, strategic brokering, he's the man that you want to speak to. He looks after my portfolio, he looks after Adrian's portfolio and our clients as well. So please reach out. If you're listening to this, you've got a friend, you've got a family member, they're about to get started in investing, this is the podcast for them. And if it's someone that's already got a few properties, same thing. Getting the right structure, putting the right processes in place from day one is going to help you get from 1 property to maybe 5 or 10 properties. So hopefully you got value from this. And if you did, please share this and like this podcast. And we'll see you next time.